Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time I'm talking episode 10 of season 3 of Game of Thrones, our season finale called Mhysa. First of all, I gotta ask, when those folks started saying that, am I the only one who started thinking about Jar Jar Binks? Okay, I just kind of wanted to put that out there. Anyway, overall, this is a good episode, but to be honest, I was kind of expecting them to kind of go for one more big surprise. And as I said in my previous reviews, I've read all the books. So I had something in mind that I was expecting, and that didn't happen. I guess that's getting saved for next season. And in retrospect, I'm kind of glad that they decided to hold on to that particular twist because let's be honest here. Last week's episode really was the climax for season 3. Here we're starting to, well, it's really more of a case of the aftermath and setting things up for next season. And the episode does a really nice job of that. I really just cannot wait for the next season. There's just so much going on that I want to know what happens next. And even though I've read the books and so I know more or less what's going to happen next, I still really want to see it carried out. Anyway, so let's just sort of check in with everybody. Now, we do get to see, let's start off with Sansa and Tyrion. And I do like how they're actually getting along. You know, as is mentioned in this episode, this is basically like the first time that Sansa has laughed in who knows how long. And I do like that it shows that, you know, these two, they're probably would not be compatible as a couple, but that Tyrion's, you know, genuinely honestly being kind to Sansa. You know, these are two people who could at least get along. They wouldn't probably be a really good married couple, but these are two people who at the very least could be friends, which is probably more than you could say that was ever possible for Robert and Cersei. I mean, they did try, but, well, we all saw how that worked out. Of course, this is Game of Thrones, so happiness never lasts. And, of course, Sansa ends up getting the news about what happened to her brother and her mother. And I really love the way they did that scene where there just are really no words. Just the look on Sophie Turner and Peter Dinklage's face just says so much. And you can really tell that Tyrion is just really disgusted with his family right there, particularly his father. And he knows that any words he might possibly try and offer Sansa are just going to ring horribly, horribly hollow. They're not going to mean anything to her. And you have to think that him being a Lannister, that's got to be really heavily on Sansa's mind. And it's really got to seem like such a huge gut punch after she was literally just kind of enjoying some time with a Lannister only a short time before. And, you know, speaking of the Lannisters, we of course get to see that scene of Joffrey just going his own ultimate ding dong, the witch is dead, and you know basically practically dancing around with glee at the idea of getting a hold of Robb's head so he can serve it to Sansa at his wedding feast. And I like how both Tyrion and Tywin, in a rare moment of actually being on the same page, they both come down on Joffrey for this. And even Cersei wants to pretend that he's joking about this. And of course, we're not going to get any Joffrey slapping here, sadly. But here, I really have to say, just once again, seeing Tywin come down on Joffrey and prove who's really running the show here. I mean, that was great. I mean, literally, it has the freaking king being sent off to bed without his supper. And that was just gorgeous. And you got to give a lot of credit to Jack Gleeson. Everyone is mine to torment. He sells that. If he wasn't such a good actor, that would have come off as just being horrible and ridiculous and cheesy. But here it fits. Here it works. And this, of course, sets the stage for another dust-up between Tywin and Tyrion. And this is actually something that I saw somebody kind of talk about last week. Like, oh, so Tyrion's decided not to rape Sansa. Well, that's good, or I guess. Like, okay, that's being a little unfair to Tyrion. But anyway, I mean, but I do like the fact that he does flat out say to his father, like, I'm not gonna rape that girl. And Tywin, of course, this is our big speech where this is our big scene of where we kind of really, for the first time, get to see a real glimpse behind the mask and really see what's going on in Tywin's head. How he views the world. And it's a great example of the saying that everybody is the hero of their own story. And Tywin is a classic example. He, from his perspective, what he says about how you would do anything for family. From his point of view, that makes all the stuff that he does seem noble and justifiable. And of course, we also get to see Tyrion not buying into that at all and throwing the whole thing back in his face and saying, well, when have you ever really done anything that did for the family that didn't benefit you? And Tywin does have a pretty good response to that, in that, like, I didn't kill you when you were a baby, and I've raised you as my son. Now, granted, he's been a complete dick to Tyrion, but even as he said in the other episode, Tyrion's a Lannister, he's been raised as a Lannister, and he does bear the Lannister name. Now, granted, that means that, despite all that, Tywin is still never going to hand over Casterly Rock to him, but it is true. Tyrion is a Lannister, and even Tywin acknowledges this. And I like how even Tyrion seems a little thrown by this. He's never seen this side of his father before. He's never even really considered that this might even be a possibility. Although you really do have to wonder why if he has never really wondered, if my father hates me so much, why did he let me live? But yeah, this of course casts a very interesting light on the relationship between these two characters. And that's something that I think is going to loom large, this scene that we have between them next season, when there's some more conflict between Tyrion and Tywin. Let me see here. Okay, so moving on to the twins. Well, we do get confirmation that the Blackfish survived. So Arya's, I suppose that would be her great uncle? Well, her mother's uncle, whatever. That he survived. I can't really remember if he survived in the books or if it was ever made clear. I just genuinely don't remember. But I can't help but think that that's probably going to pop up again at some point. Now let's see. Of course, I also like this that we do get the moment to really spend some time with Walder Frey and Roose Bolton and really get into their heads. Honestly, one thing that I really was a little bit disappointed with after this scene in the books is we didn't really get a huge amount of perspective on Walder Frey. Most of what we see of Walder Frey in the books is more before all of this happens, and a lot of time is spent waxing poetic about how he was currently on his 9th wife and all this other stuff, and his various relations and all this other stuff. And it was certainly interesting to get the history of the character, but this conversation that he has with Roose Bolton really does do a great job of sketching him out as a character more firmly. And just as importantly, it really goes, and even Frey even says, I would never have done that to Robb if I hadn't had certain assurances. And as much as people might want to blame Walder Frey for what he's done, and of course he deserves the blame, the mastermind behind all this is still Tywin Lannister. I mean, the last words that Robb heard, the Lannisters send their regards. Well, Bolton wasn't kidding about that, because remember that scene with him and Jaime? Jaime even says to Roose Bolton, when you see Robb, give him our regards. Now, granted, Jaime didn't know that this was going to happen, but still, the Lannisters did indeed send their regards. And we also get to see some more about Roose Bolton. Him talking about, maybe eventually I'll move into Winterfell. Because, Roose Bolton has gotten named Lord Paramount of the North, so we understand what Roose got out of the deal. And, of course, now Walder's in a pretty nice position with the guy who is unquestionably the most powerful guy in Westeros. And, of course, we do get the confirmation from Roose of what I and a lot of other people had pretty much figured out several episodes ago, that the guy torturing Theon was indeed his bastard son, Ramsay Snow. Oh, like I said, most everybody's figured that out a long time ago. And here we get to see boy, I can't talk. We get to see Theon's transformation into Reek, and that was something that was really done off screen in the books. And I did previously complain about how much time they spent just torturing poor Theon to the point where it seemed really excessive. But here, I am glad that they did show that, because that was one of those things that them not showing that is really one of my heavier criticisms in the book. It was such a wait, what? Huh? I literally had to go back and reread that section again, and to make sure I understood what was going on, because it just seemed so out of nowhere to me, anyway. And of course, this is our first chance. I think it was since season 1 maybe, to see Balin and Yara again. And I like how Yara just basically tells her dad to get stuff, and is like, you know what, I'm going to take best ship, 50 of your best guys, and I'm going to go and I'm going to get my little brother. And this, of course, speaks very well of Yara as a character, and does show a significant growth in her character, because look at where she was when we first met him, where she was just all about giving Theon crap for no good reason. And this sets the stage for, of course, Yara's adventures in the future, which were, of course, a big part of Book 4. What happened to her? I actually wasn't that huge a fan of that particular storyline in Book 4. I guess I should probably call that character Asha, since that was what she was called in the books. But I have a feeling that they'll be able to make that a little bit more interesting than it was in the books. Let me see here. Okay, so let's hop over and talk about Bronn. Okay, first of all, one thing I love about this is one of those things where finally these characters really, who have been just moving around for so darn long, finally interact. We get to see him meet Sam and Gilly. And again, there's really such a part of you that just was yeah, man, go with Sam. You can reunite with Jon. It'll be okay. Things will be better. But you realize that Bronn's right. That's not what he needs to be doing. He has to follow these dreams and find the three-eyed crow. But still, it was just a moment that just gave me such a charge. And it was really also a moment, of course, where characters from completely different sides of things were able to exchange information, and that very important information. I mean, the exchange of very important information is a big, big thing here. Excuse me. Another thing that I liked was Bronn's story about the rat. And again, that really serves to drive home why Walder Frey violating sacred hospitality was such a big thing, and why Robb would have been willing to put that amount of trust in Walder. As I said last time around, Walder Frey did something that, by the standards of the people of Westeros, was basically unthinkable. Just not something that anybody could do. It was just not done. Unthinkable is really the best word for it. And of course, we also get to see in that scene a really nice moment of showing us again how smart Sam is. like last time around, we got to see him. He knew a way to get from one side of the wall to the other. Here, he's able to figure out with just a couple of glances who Bronn is, and he even points out like I know a dire wolf when I see one. You are you speak like a noble, like you speak like a noble when you're crippled. There's a big dude there. Yeah, you've got to be Bronn. And of course, this ends with Sam also revealing the information of how to kill the White Walkers and giving Bronn and Hodor and the Reeds some obsidian weapons so that they at least got a shot. And yeah, because they're heading for some tough country. And of course, because Sam was able to survive, he's also able to bring this information to the Night's Watch. And I did totally love that scene with Maester Aemon. And you have to remember, that guy's blind. Yeah, I had actually kind of forgotten about that. And of course, it was quite funny to him like, Sam, do you remember your oaths? And they're all like, no, 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 this isn't the case. I don't remember if Gilly named her son Sam. I think it was... I'm probably actually remembering details from something that happened later on, so I don't really want to comment too much about that. But again, it really was just a nice and sweet moment between those two characters, and it's one I enjoy. And of course, Gilly kind of says, like, okay, I'm totally willing to help out around here. Well, that gives them a reason as to why she's going to be hanging around for a while longer, because Gilly and Sam do have, they've got some more adventures coming up for them, and as I've said, I really do enjoy this time we spend with those two characters because they're honestly very sweet people at heart. And seeing them together, even when they have to deal with bad things, I think it brings some lightness to this series. You know, as dark as this show is, it also has some very funny moments, and it has some very touching moments, and like I said, just seeing those two together, it reminds us that there is still kindness and gentleness in the Game of Thrones world. Now let's see. Let's move on and talk about what's going on over at Dragonstone. And of course, our main thing here is Davos kind of bonding with Gendry, and that was a really nicely done scene because one, it was just a real chance to really showcase both of the characters, show them form a bond, and if that hadn't happened, then Davos, basically throwing his life away in order to save Gendry, it really wouldn't have been something that people would have bought into. It would not have, that he would do that without that scene, it just would not have sold it. But I do like how Davos totally faces what he's got, what is happening, what he's done with Stannis, and he even says, like, flat out to him, like, no, you are wrong about this. Davos is doing the job that really the Hand of the King needs to do. He's the Commander Riker there. He's the one who's got to step in there and say, no, this is a bad idea. You shouldn't do this. And I love how he's constantly on Stannis about this because he believes in his heart that Stannis is a good man. And whether or not you believe that is up for debate, but it is reasonable to say that there is good in Stannis. And, well, now that Robb's gone, look at the other choices we have for the Iron Throne, huh? He might not be the nicest guy around, but Stannis is suddenly starting to look like the lesser of three evils at this point. And what I also like is that as soon as Melisandre sees that letter from the Night's Watch, she does a complete 180. And she's like, no, he's right. You're going to need him. And you can tell that Stannis is thinking, what the hell? But he's obviously catches on, like, okay, if after what he has done, Melisandre is saying that we need Davos around, this must really be serious enough that she's willing to put that aside. And given that Melisandre is quite fond of, killing people, well, or at least shows no hesitation in doing it if she thinks it'll further her goals, that's really saying something. And also, I do have to concede to Gendry's point that yeah, if you were a 19-year-old guy who'd never been with a woman, and a woman like Melisandre started coming on to you, yeah, that's totally a lamb to the slaughter. Yeah, no 19-year-old guy under those circumstances is not going to completely and utterly fall for that. Yeah, no chance. And I like how even Davos is like, yeah, yeah. If it had been me in your shoes, I'd have totally fallen for that too. But anyway, as I've said, I really like the fact that Gendry is still running around, that he's still a wild card out there. And this isn't how it is in the books, as I've said, which really is one of those elements that's really keeping me interested in the show, because I don't know what's going to happen there. And for me, as somebody who's read the books, that's very exciting. And again, that's such an incredibly smart move on the part of the people that make this show. Let me see. Yes. Since we were briefly talking about stuff at the wall, let's hop back there, and we get to see the confrontation between Jon and Ygritte. Honestly, I don't really remember this scene, what happens after that, in the books too well. But man, give it to Kit Harington. He just really, really sells Jon's absolute anguish of this. I mean, just the way he says, "I have to go home now." I mean, you can see there's like a little bit of the child within Jon just sort of coming out there. Like, he knows no other way to express it. And of course, this is just absolutely killing Ygritte too. You know nothing, Jon Snow. Yeah, I like how Jon says, like, you knew what I was. You knew who I was. And of course, Jon also knew that what Ygritte promised to do to him if he ever betrayed her. So really, this was both of them cruising with their towards a tragedy, eyes open, neither one of them really fully accepting the reality that they were dealing with. But, love makes you do funny things. And just watching that scene, you can see there is no way around it that Jon was telling the truth, that he genuinely loved Ygritte. And you can see the way that she's just like struggling to kill him and to not kill him at the same time. I mean, it's killing her inside as well. Doesn't stop her from putting 3 arrows in Jon, because, man, Ygritte's pretty darn badass. But Jon manages to survive. And, yeah, to be continued, huh? Let me see here. Yes, of course we have to talk about Shae and Varys. Another really nicely done scene. I don't believe there was a scene like that in the books. But again, a lot of what they've done with Shae as a character is quite a bit different than it was in the books. And as I've said previously, I'm really okay with that. Shae is a much, much more interesting character here on the show than she is in the books. And I like how Varys even says that you know that the love you feel for him is real, that it has nothing to do with his money. And while it's strongly, like what she said about to Tyrion previously about how, come away with me and we can go to the other side of the world, and Tyrion's all like, well, what am I going to do for a living? Juggle? That it reminds us that she was being sincere there, and that her anguish about the current situation with Sansa, even though she even acknowledges that she would die or kill for Sansa. Really, it's just such a constant, it has to be such a constant twisting of the knife for Shae. These two people whom she both loves dearly. But still, give Shae credit, man. She literally throws those diamonds right back at Varys and is like, no, I'm not leaving him. Consequences be damned. Which really does speak well of her as a character. There's a lot more that I could say about that, but again, I'd have to spoil some stuff from the books, and I don't want to do that because, yeah, cool stuff there. Let's see. Okay, of course we have to talk about Arya. And I like how the way the Hound puts it is like, you've never killed a man before, and Arya goes, this is the first time. But this isn't the first time that Arya has killed someone. It's just that the last time she did it, she killed somebody who was basically a boy. And of course, Vala Morghulis. Yeah. I like how they I think that was really a necessary callback to remind people, because I think a lot of people out there had probably forgotten about that coin and what it meant. So unsurprisingly, that's a little plot that we're going to be seeing more of next season. And I also like how the Hound is like, "Hey, where did you get this?" "From you." And the Hound is just like, next time you're going to kill somebody, tell me first. I like that you can sense that the Hound is developing a little bit of a grudging respect for Arya. And again, as I said, just seeing the two Stark girls bounce off this guy just makes for some really entertaining scenes. And of course, that brings us to one other thing I forgot to talk about at the very beginning when we see Rob's body with Grey Wind's head sort of attached, as it were, to it by a pike. The way I remember it in the books was them saying that they'd actually sewn Rob's head on his wolf's body. I mean, remember, the head wasn't in the show, it was literally stuck up there with a pole. But later on, the guys were talking about having sewed the head on. So I was like, wait a minute. Am I remembering this right, or whatever? But yeah, just seeing that made it seem it was definitely more emotionally painful than it was to read that in the books, because it's just like, oh my god, talk about insult to injury. But anyway, now we have to hop over to the other side of the world and our obligatory scene with Dany. And I really love the way they handled that scene with her questioning, am I going to be seen as a liberator or as a conqueror? And, that is a very fair question for her to ask. And it's, of course, very understandable, given her feelings about slavery, as to why Dany would not want to be seen as a conqueror. But then she sort of goes out there and she makes her speech, and suddenly all those slaves are crying out to her, mother, mother. And I remember this scene from the books, and I was like, wow. But here, actually seeing it with real people, it's just like, oh man, this I can totally buy into, and it's amazing. And of course, we get that enormous crowd scene, and the dragons flying around, and that great, fantastic music. I like how, after the way the last episode ended, basically like the biggest gut punch in the show's history, even bigger than when they killed Ned. Here we go out on a moment of joy, of happiness, of hope. And we needed that, because we need to be reminded that those things still exist. As bad as things are, as bad as they're going to get, and believe me, things are going to get bad, those things are still out there. And those things are still worth fighting for and dying for. Because if we don't have those things, then we really are just dead men walking. Cold, unfeeling dead men. And of course, there is going to be more fighting, more killing, and more dying. Because the story isn't over yet. I'll be there for Season 4. I hope you guys will join me then. Until next time, take care and have a good one.